Okay, today we're going to talk about chapter 18 in our Atomic Habits. So if you want to follow along, we are starting on page 217. We're flying through this book. As always, right, I read through some of these paragraphs, share some of my thoughts, hopefully make it a little more applicable, and especially for those of you that are driving or somewhere where you just want to listen, I hope this is helpful. These tips and concepts are really good for me because there's a lot of things I want to change and can't understand why can I not stick with changing this particular habit, either eliminating something that I don't want to do or trying to start a habit that I know that I should do but just cannot make myself stay consistent with. So hopefully this is helpful. This chapter is about, or title I should say, the truth about talent, when genes matter and when they don't. How some of us just are born with certain personality traits and also talents and abilities, and how we can use that as far as honing in on the habits we want to change, either by eliminating or adding them in. So we'll get started. He makes a good comparison when we talk about genetics. He talks about Michael Phelps, who's the long, very tall, athletic, fast swimmer. And then he also compares him to a man named Hicham. I can't even pronounce his last name. He's a fantastic athlete. He is a Moroccan runner who holds 2 Olympic gold medals, one of the greatest middle distance runners of all time, a whole bunch of world records. So he talks about these 2 different athletes, and he says these athletes are wildly different in many ways, even though they're both Olympic medalists, right? For starters, one competed on land and the other on water, but most notably, they differ significantly in height. One is the El Garoju, I can't even say his last name, is 5 feet 9 inches tall. Phelps is 6 feet 4 inches tall. Despite the 7-inch difference in height, the 2 men are identical in one respect. They are the same inseam length on their pants. So you've got, interesting side note, you've got 5'9" and 6'4", but the same inseam on their pants. How is this possible? Phelps has relatively short legs for his height and a very long torso, which is the perfect build for swimming. The other guy has incredibly long legs and a short upper body, which is an ideal frame for distance running. Now imagine if these world-class athletes were to switch sports. Given his remarkable athleticism, could Michael Phelps become an Olympic caliber distance runner with enough training? It's very unlikely. At peak fitness, Phelps weighed 194, which is 40% heavier than this other guy who competed at an ultralight 138 pounds. Taller runners are heavier runners, and every extra pound is a curse when it comes to distance running. Against elite competition, Phelps would be doomed from the start. Similarly, this other guy might be one of the best runners in history, but it's doubtful that he would ever qualify for the Olympics as a swimmer. The average height of an Olympic gold medalist in the men's 1500 meter is 5 feet 10 inches. In comparison, the average height of an Olympic gold medalist in the men's 100 is 6 feet 4 inches. So even between different placements in the Olympics of swimming, height, the more height you have, appears to be faster. Swimmers tend to be tall, have long backs and arms, which are ideal for pulling through the water. This other guy would be severely disadvantaged before he even touched the pool because he's so many inches shorter with different limb length, right? So the secret to maximizing your odds of success is to choose the right field of competition. So we're going to kind of take that idea and segue into habits and things that you and I deal with in our own life. This is just as true with habit change as it is with sports and business. Habits are easier to perform and more satisfying to stick with when they align with natural inclinations and abilities. Like Michael Phelps in the pool or this other guy on the track, you want to play a game where the odds are in your favor. So embracing this strategy requires acceptance of the simple truth that people are born with different abilities. Some people don't like to discuss this fact, and on the surface, your genes seem to be fixed. It's no fun to talk about things you can't control, right? Plus, phrases like biological determinism makes it sound like certain individuals are destined for success and others doomed to failure, but this is short-sighted view of the influence of genes on behavior. So when we keep this in mind, yes, some of us are built differently, born differently genetically. Also, as we move this into habits, we're born with different personality traits. Some of us are more prone to be this way or this way, right? More anxious, less anxious, more outgoing, less outgoing. And you see that from very small ages. If you've been around children, you see from the womb, they have different personality traits genetically instilled in them. The strength of genetics is also their weaknesses. Genes cannot be easily changed, which means they provide a powerful advantage in favorable circumstances and a serious disadvantage in unfavorable circumstances. If you want to dunk a basketball, being 7 feet tall is very useful. If you want to perform a gymnastics routine, being 7 feet tall is a great hindrance, right? Our environment determines the suitability of our genes and the utility of our natural talents. When our environment changes, so do the qualities that determine our success. This is true not just for physical characteristics, but for mental ones as well. I'm smart if you ask me about habits and human behavior, says the author, not so much when it comes to knitting, rocket propulsion, or guitar chords. Competence is highly dependent on context. People at the top of any competitive field are not only well trained, they're also well suited to the task. And this is why, if you want to be truly great, selecting the right place to focus is crucial. In short, genes do not determine your destiny, they determine your area of opportunity. As this gentleman said, genes can predispose, but they don't predetermine. The areas where you're genetically predisposed to success are the areas where habits are more likely to be satisfying. The key is to direct your effort toward areas that both excite you and match your natural skills to align with your ambition and your ability. This is like, so on a personal note, out of 5 kids, I'm the oldest. All 4 of my siblings are athletic. I mean, some play basketball in college. I mean, they played every sport possible. Literally anything they want to do. They can move. They do it well. I, on the other hand, have none of that. Zero coordination. Athleticism, nothing. So I was their big cheerleader sitting on the bench, and I loved it. It was not a problem. But my mom would always tell me, she'd pat me on the shoulder or the head very lovingly and say, Jess, like, it's okay. You're good with people. As a kid, I was like, what the heck does that mean? She's like, you have people skills. Like, you're just good with people. I'm like, well, I want to be out on the basketball court, or I want to be doing this, or I want to be doing that. Like the things that I could see, right? That wasn't my strong suit. And so as I got older and decided what do I want to do? What job do I want to go into? How do I want to do things? Like, I actually drew back on that one talent that was naturally engraved in me, which was dealing with people, being empathetic and understanding and supportive and loving, and which kind of has just geared me towards what I do now with fitness and coaching. And just basically, I'm a therapist. I just help people overcome reasons that they can't change because I want them to feel better. And I love it. So now come full circle. I'm like, Mom, I am good with people. I still can't do any of those other things my siblings do. And picking up heavy weights and putting them down is not the same as like doing that athletic movement. But I looked at all the things that I did and could do amongst other, abilities, and found, okay, I am better with the group of people. I'm terrible at numbers. I'm, terrible with this, terrible with that, but I am good with this. So find something, if possible, right? I realize not every situation allows you to pick and choose, that you're already naturally good at, or you enjoy, or you just have more natural ability at. Because there's no way I could do anything with sports or athleticism in that way. So just look at what you're good at. That's the whole point. We all have things. Maybe your mom told you you're good with people too. So find something that's good with people. So back onto this. The obvious question is, how do I figure out where the odds are in my favor? How do I identify the opportunities and habits that are right for me? The first place we'll look for answers is by understanding your personality, right? It's kind of what I was explaining. So your personality will influence your habits. Your genes are operating beneath the surface of every habit, indeed beneath the surface of every behavior. Genes have been shown to influence everything from the number of hours you spend watching television, to your likelihood to marry or divorce, to your tendency to get addicted to drugs, alcohol, or nicotine. There's a strong genetic component to how obedient or rebellious you are when facing authority, how vulnerable or resistant you are to stressful events, how proactive or reactive you tend to be, and how even captivated or bored you feel during sensory experiences like attending a concert. As this behavioral geneticist at King's College told me, it is now at the point where we have stopped testing to see if traits have a genetic component, because we literally can't find a single one that isn't influenced by our genes. So bundled together, your unique cluster of genetic traits predispose you to a particular personality. Your personality is a set of characteristics that is consistent from situation to situation. The most proven scientific analysis of personality traits is known as the Big Five, which breaks them down into 5 spectrums of behavior. So he's going to kind of talk about this so that we can then apply it to our own selves and understanding like the whole concept of like certain habits are easier for some people to tackle than others, right? And it comes down to what he's saying is like this genetic predisposition. One thing I always tell people when they're trying to change habits is the first trait, not all of us are consistent or disciplined. I mean, I think we'd like to think we are, but really when we get down to it, like if you're not someone that is very consistent with doing things, which some people are very consistent, it's just naturally easy. Some people are super disciplined with everything in their life. They've always been that way. The good majority of us aren't. Those are 2 areas that are very challenging for us. So I'll ask somebody, how often do you want to floss your teeth? And they'll say, well, I'd like to floss maybe every other day. Okay, well, great. Well, how often do you floss? Maybe once every 3 to 4 weeks. And it's interesting to me because floss is dirt cheap, so most of us can afford it. It sits right next to your toothbrush and toothpaste, which you use a couple times a day. So it's not that you don't, out of sight, out of mind. It's sitting right there, but we don't take the time to do it. And it's super easy and shouldn't be that painful, but we don't do it. I mean, I go back and forth with being consistent with flossing. So I have to tell them, if you can't floss as often as you would like to set yourself up to floss, then you're not maybe a consistent person. So we're not working on flossing, we're working on becoming consistent. And then the more consistent you are with a few things and you find the reward of that being consistent, healthier gums if it's flossing, you're more likely to be consistent in other areas, because we're changing the consistency that you're either good or bad at, right? So these Big Five, spectrums of behavior. Number 1 is openness to experience, from curious and inventive on one to cautious and consistent on the other. Types of people: conscientious, organized, and efficient to easygoing and spontaneous. Extroversion is outgoing and energetic to solitary and reserved. You likely know them as extrovert or introvert. Agreeableness, friendly and compassionate to challenging and detached, right? So showing the opposing of each of these categories. Neuroticism, anxious and sensitive to confident, calm, and stable. So all 5 of these characteristics have biological underpinnings. Extroversion, for instance, can be tracked from birth. If scientists play a loud noise in the nursing ward, some babies turn toward it while others turn away. When the researchers tracked these children through life, they found that the babies who turned toward the noise were more likely to grow up extroverts. Those who turned away were more likely to grow up introverts. So people who are high in agreeableness are kind, considerate, and warm. They also tend to have higher natural oxytocin levels, a hormone that plays an important role in social bonding. It increases feelings of trust and can act as a natural antidepressant. You can easily imagine how someone with more oxytocin might be inclined to build habits like writing thank you notes or organizing social events, because those things are easier for them. As a third example, consider neuroticism, which is a personality trait all people possess to a various degree. People who are high in neuroticism tend to be anxious and worry more than others. This trait has been linked to hypersensitivity of the amygdala, the portion of the brain responsible for noticing threats. In other words, people who are more sensitive to negative cues in their environment are more likely to score high in neuroticism. Our habits are not solely determined by our personalities, though. There is no doubt that our genes nudge us in a certain direction. So remember that. We can always change things. So don't give into that of, oh, this is how I am, accepted, or I'm not going to ever change, because you can. It just might be a little bit more challenging. Our deeply rooted preferences make certain behaviors easier for some people than for others. You don't have to apologize for these differences or feel guilty about them, but you do have to work through them. A person scores lower on conscientiousness, for example, will be less likely to be orderly by nature and may need to rely more heavily on environment design to stick with good habits. As a reminder for the less conscientious readers among us, environment design is a strategy we discuss in chapters 6 and 12. It's basically setting yourself up for success by what your surroundings are set up. The takeaway is that you should build habits that work for your personality. People get ripped working out like a bodybuilder, but if you prefer rock climbing or cycling or rowing, then shape your exercise habit around your interests. If your friend follows a low-carb diet, but you find that low-fat works for you, then more power to you. If you want to read more, don't be embarrassed if you prefer steamy romance novels over nonfiction. Read whatever fascinates you. You don't have to build the habits everyone tells you to build. Choose the habit that best suits you, not the one that is most popular. There is a version of every habit that can bring joy and satisfaction. Find it. Habits need to be enjoyable if they're going to stick. This is the core idea behind his 4th law that we've talked about. Tailoring your habits to your personality is a good start, but this is not the end of the story. Let's turn our attention to finding and designing situations where you have a natural advantage. Learning to play a game where the odds are in your favor is critical for maintaining motivation and feeling successful. Because don't you feel like that's one of the hardest things, is how the heck do I stay motivated, especially if you're not seeing some sort of progress in that area that you would like. In theory, you can almost enjoy anything. In practice, you're more likely to enjoy the things that come easily to you. People who are talented in a particular area tend to be more competent at that task and are then praised for doing a good job. They stay energized because they're making progress where others have failed, and because they get rewarded with better pay and bigger opportunities, which not only makes them happier, but also propels them to produce even higher quality work. It's a virtuous cycle. Pick the right habit and progress is easy. Pick the wrong habit and life is a struggle. So how do you pick the right habit is the question. The first step is something we covered in the 3rd law, which is make it easy. In many cases, when people pick the wrong habit, it simply means they picked a habit that was too difficult, right? Too hard to change, too much emotion attached to it. So when a habit is easy, you're more likely to be successful. When you're successful, you're more likely to feel satisfied. However, there is another level to consider. In the long run, if you continue to advance and improve, any area can become challenging. At some point, you need to make sure you're playing the right game for your skill set, and how do you figure that out? The most common approach is trial and error. Of course, there's a problem with this strategy. Life is short. You don't have time to try every career, date every eligible bachelor, or play every musical instrument. Thankfully, there's an effective way to manage this conundrum, and it's known as the explore-exploit trade-off. So let's dive into that. In the beginning of a new activity, there should be a period of exploration. In relationships, it's called dating. In college, it's called the liberal arts. In business, it's called split testing. The goal is to try out many possibilities, research a broad range of ideas, and then cast a wide net. After this initial period of exploration, shift your focus to the best solution you found, but keep experimenting occasionally. The proper balance depends on whether you're winning or losing, and if you're currently winning, you exploit. If you're currently losing, you continue to explore, and explore. In the long run, it is probably most effective to work on the strategy that seems to deliver the best results at about 80 to 90% of the time, and then you keep exploring with the remaining 10 to 20%. So Google famously asks employees to spend 80% of the work week on their official job and 20% on projects of their choice, which has led to the creation of blockbuster products like AdWords and Gmail. So the optimal approach also depends on how much time you have. If you have a lot of time, like someone at the beginning of their career, it makes more sense to explore, because once you find the right thing, you still have a good amount of time to exploit it, right? To do it, to grow it. If you're pressed for time, say as you come up with a deadline for a project, you should implement the best solution you found so far and get some results. As you explore different options, there are a series of questions you can ask yourself to continually narrow on the habits and areas that will be most satisfying to you. So, question: what feels like fun to me but is work to others? The mark of whether you are made for a task is not whether you love it, but whether you can handle the pain of the task easier than most people. When you are enjoying yourself while other people are complaining, the work that hurts you less than it hurts others is the work you are made to do. So that's interesting. I guess all work is painful, but it's, do you have less pain than others, and that's what's meant for you? So you really do need to find something that you enjoy. Maybe other people couldn't do it, but like with what I do for work, I work a lot of hours, but I don't view it as work because I love it. It's part of my hobby is learning more and becoming better and taking care of people. So that's how I've kind of found my little niche. Next question is, what makes me lose track of time? Flow is the mental state you enter when you are so focused on the task at hand that the rest of the world fades away. This blend of happiness and peak performance is what athletes and performers experience when they're in the zone. It is nearly impossible to experience a flow state and not find the task satisfying to to at least some degree. So when you're in that flow, right, you feel good about it. You're seeing progress, change, getting things crossed off your list. It's just coming together. I always think of when my kids are on a video game or whatever, you could be standing a foot from them talking to them, they don't even hear you. They're so focused on what they're doing. So next question, where do I get greater returns than the average person, right? As we're trying to figure out what each of these habits are that we want to focus on. We are continually comparing ourselves to those around us, and a behavior is more likely to be satisfying when the comparison is in our favor. When I started writing at his website, my email list grew very quickly. I wasn't quite sure what I was doing well, but I knew that results seemed to be coming faster for me than for some of my colleagues, which motivated me to keep going. Right? So if you know something you're doing is a little bit easier and doing better than what everyone else around you is doing, then you found what you're good at. So another question is, last one, what comes naturally to me? For just a moment, ignore what you've been taught. Ignore that society has told you. Ignore that others expect of you, and look inside yourself and ask, what feels natural to me? When have I felt alive? When have I felt like the real me? No internal judgments or people pleasing. No second guessing or self-criticism, just feelings of engagement and enjoyment. Whenever you feel authentic and genuine, you are headed in the right direction. So again, these necessarily aren't little habits of, do I eat one less snack a day? This is kind of like when you're making big decisions on the whole. To be honest, some of this process is just luck. Phelps and this other guy, I can't pronounce his name, were lucky to be born with a rare set of abilities that are highly valued by society and be placed in the ideal environment for those abilities. We all have limited time on this planet, and the truly great among us are the ones who not only work hard, but also have the good fortune to be exposed to opportunities that favor us. But what if you don't want to leave it up to luck? If you can't find a game where the odds are stacked in your favor, create one. The cartoonist behind the Dilbert column says, everyone has at least a few areas in which they could be at the top 25% with some effort. In my case, I can draw better than most people, but I'm hardly an artist. I'm not any funnier than the average stand-up comedian who never makes it big, but I am funnier than most people. The magic is that few people can draw well and write jokes. It's the combination of the two that makes what I do so rare. And when you add in my business background, suddenly I had a topic that few cartoonists could hope to understand without living in it. When you can't win by being better, you can win by being different. By combining your skills, you reduce the level of competition, which makes it easier to stand out. You can shortcut the need for a genetic advantage or for years of practice by rewriting the rules. A good player works hard to win the game everyone else is playing, but a great player creates a new game that favors their strengths and avoids their weaknesses. In college, I designed my own major, biomechanics, which was a combination of physics, chemistry, biology, and anatomy. I wasn't smart enough to stand out among the top physics or biology majors, so I created my own game, and because it suited me, I was only taking the courses I was interested in. Studying felt like less of a chore. It was also easier to avoid the trap of comparing myself to everyone else. After all, nobody else was taking the same combination of classes, so who could say if they were better or worse? So specialization is a powerful way to overcome the accident of bad genetics. The more you master a specific skill, the harder it becomes for others to compete with you. Many bodybuilders are stronger than the average arm wrestler, but even a massive bodybuilder may lose at arm wrestling because the arm wrestling champ has a very specific strength. Even if you're not the most naturally gifted, you can often win by being the best in a very narrow category. This is a funny comparison. He says, boiling water will soften a potato, but then it hardens an egg. You can't control whether you're the potato or the egg, but you can decide to play a game where it's better to be hard or soft. If you can find a more favorable environment, you can transform the situation from where the odds are against you to the one that are in your favor. So lastly, how to get the most out of your genes. Our genes do not eliminate the need for hard work. They clarify it. So again, they don't eliminate the need for hard work, even if you have good genes. Michael Phelps had fantastic genes, but still worked his butt off. They just clarify it. They tell us what to work hard on. Once we realize our strengths, we know where to spend our time and energy. We know which types of opportunities to look for and which types of challenges to avoid. The better we understand our nature, the better our strategy can be. So biological differences matter. Even so, it's more productive to focus on whether you're fulfilling your own personal potential than comparing yourself to someone else. So look at bettering yourself instead of being better than someone next to you or being better than someone online. What's the best version of you comparing against yourself from yesterday, right? Take the time to really develop yourself and not trying to be as, similar to someone that you've seen next to you or online. The fact that you have a natural limit to any specific ability has nothing to do with whether you're reaching the ceiling of your capabilities. People get so caught up in the fact that they have limits that they really exert the effort required to get close to them. Furthermore, genes can't make you successful if you're not doing the work. Yes, it's possible that the ripped trainer at the gym has better genes, but if you haven't put in the same reps, it's impossible to say if you have been dealt a better or worse genetic hand. So you work as hard as someone you admire, don't explain away their success as luck. In summary, one of the best ways to ensure your habits remain satisfying over the long run is to pick behaviors that align with your personality and skills, and then work hard on those things that come easy to you. So I love that. As far as not comparing, yourself to somebody else, I love how he says, the ripped trainer at the gym, has better genes, but if you don't put in the same amount of work she did, then how do you know you haven't been dealt the same set of genes? But a lot of us are willing to put the work in to see, hey, am I good at this or not good at this? And that actually, on the swimming topic, reminds me of my son. When he was 11, would swim back and forth through our pool, and I have a video of his first time coming from one end to the other, and I couldn't even tell what stroke it was. It was horrible. His head never even, he'd turn his head side to side trying to take breaths, but he never actually went under the water. I mean, it was disastrous. But he was 11. He wasn't supposed to know any different, right? I was just like, what stroke was that? And he was so proud of himself. And I said, yes, great job at whatever you just did. I was proud of him for trying. And my husband's like, we actually signed him up for some lessons around that same time period. And after seeing that, my husband's like, I think we made a mistake. We need to try a different sport. Well, at that point, if we just stopped, we would have never known, is he genetically gifted to do well or not? He hasn't put the hard work in to determine that. And so thankfully, he still continued swimming even past that first race. And then swam all through high school, which he just finished at age 18. And he and his teammates have broken straight records now. So he's a phenomenal swimmer. I didn't see that in the beginning. He didn't have, and he has genetics. He's 6'4", just like Michael Phelps, with all of his same body length. So he was given the genetics to do it, but he hadn't determined if he'd put the work in to see if he was good or not, right? So he could have stopped swimming or, continued swimming, and we never would have known if he would have been good or bad. So you just need to find out, am I good at this, right? Do I have a genetic hand at this? And if you don't, try something else, which we thought with his genetics and his height, he'd been good at basketball. We tried it. It was not his cup of tea, which is what put us into swimming. So you have to test different things and see what you're naturally good at. He wasn't good at basketball, but he was way, to the level that everyone else was. But he was really, really naturally gifted at swimming. And we just had to test the water to see where we were. So that applies to us also as we are doing things. Some habits are going to be easier to change or harder to change depending on what our personality is and what we're predisposed to feel and how to process things. This chapter was a little bit larger as far as trying new things and not necessarily changing individual small little habits throughout the day, like drinking more water. But you can take the concept of which of the habits are easier or harder for me because it's naturally within my genetic wheelhouse, and then work on those to get more consistent, kind of feel better about yourself. It's I don't know, I feel like it's about gaining confidence. And when you gain that confidence with something, it's easier to take it to the next thing. So hope that helps. Make a list of looking at all the things that you do and go through his 5 questions. If you're good at them, if you stand out, if you enjoy them, and if you can get into that flow state to where you want to do it for a while and you ignore everything else around you.